Greetings. Welcome to the Excel lesson. I'm sitting here laughing at myself because I have recorded this my third time to record this lesson, because the first time they couldn't make it into a YouTube video, and then the second time after I recorded it I hit the wrong location with my mouse and destroyed the entire thing. So I'm really hoping this one goes well. Welcome. This is the Chapter 7 Excel lesson. It is, the Excel lesson is ATC 7-9. The spreadsheet analysis using Excel is the title, and it's on page 413. When you open yours up, I'm going to open this up so you can see it. So you would put your name in here. I'm going to put in Dr. Foltz, that's my name. And then when I put in sales and Vong to give you a reference point to where we're beginning with building this spreadsheet. The first instruction is set up the following spreadsheet comparing the two companies. So when we're going to begin to prepare a spreadsheet, we always start by building the A column, so we'll know how wide it has to be, and then we build the rest of the columns after that. So in this one, we have sales, and it's in row 3. So in row 4, we want cost of goods sold. And in row 4, we want gross profit. And in row 6, we don't want anything, just the way it looks in the book. And then we want gross profit percentage. And then on line 8, we don't want anything. And on line 9, we want accounts receivable. And on line 10, we want allowance for doubtful accounts. And then we want net realizable value. On line 11, on line 12, we don't want anything. On line 13, we want accounts receivable turnover. And on line 14, we don't want anything, and we want average days to collect on line 15. And then below that, we have some further requirements. So as we look at this, we can review and see our sales, our cost of goods sold. Ours looks very much like theirs. Ours has all of this information, and it's flushed to the left-hand margin. Allowance for doubtful accounts is the widest one. So I'm going to come up here between A and B, and I'm going to double click between A and B and get A opened up as wide as allowance for doubtful accounts. And now I can really see that my A column looks very much like theirs. Now then, I have this Vong name in column B, and I want to make my Vong name look just like theirs. So I have Vong, and I open up the Home tab, and I'm going to do bold because theirs is in bold. I'm going to come back to the Home tab, and I'm going to do an underline because theirs is underlined. And I'm going to come back to the Home tab, and I'm going to do centered because theirs is centered. Now those are all skills that we've been doing for several weeks, and I hope that you're quite good at them by now. Now then, I have to put 800,000 in sales and 600,000 in cost of goods sold. So I'm going to format the sales to have a $sign because it's the first entry in a list, and in accounting we always put the $sign in the first entry of the list. So I clicked on Home. I went across the Home toolbar to Cells and saw Format in the upper right, and then I got a menu and it said Format Cells at the very bottom of the menu. And then it gave me this format cells menu. I want this to be currency because I want it to be 800,000. I want it to not have any decimal points. I want it to have that dollar sign, and I want it to have black negative for its negative numbers. So there's that 800,000. When I look at it, it is off to one side, and I want it over towards the left-hand side, so I just have to move it over there. For the 600,000, I want it to be a number. So I'm going to come over home, come over to format, come over to cells, and then format. And then I'm going to open that up, and the very last of the menu is format cells. And when I get format cells, I want it to be a number. I want it to have no decimal points. I want it to use the comma separator at the thousands, and I want a negative number with black parentheses. So I'm going to put that in for the 600,000. And mine looks very much like theirs. And then I'm going to have accounts receivable, and I put in 130,000. And then I put in 10,000. And for the 130,000, I'm going to go ahead and again format this one. This is at the top of a list that would be in the balance sheet instead of in the income statement. So I'm going to go ahead and put the dollar signs in that. If some people might not want the dollar signs in there, and that would be up to them. I don't want decimal points. I have the dollar sign. I want a black parentheses for my negative numbers, and I'm going to say okay. And then for the next one, I want the home tab to give me the home toolbar. I want to come all the way across to the right to where it says cells, and to the menu that says format cells. Click on that menu. It's the very last item in that menu, says format cells. I'm going to make this a number. I'm going to have no decimal points in it. I'm going to have commas for the dividers, and I'm going to have negative parentheses black numbers. So now I have it set up for what they have for Vong, and my Vong looks very much like theirs. Now their C column, they narrow that down, so I'm going to drag that over using the crosshairs between the D and the C, or the C and the D, whichever way you want to look at that, and I'm going to drag that over, and then I'm going to have to enter Christ, C-R-I-S-T, in the first box, and I'm going to go to home, and I want to make that bold because theirs is bold. I'm going to go to home, and I'm going to make that underlined because theirs is underlined. I'm going to go to home, and I'm going to make that centered because theirs is centered. And then I'm going to put in $1,100,000. And then I'm going to put in $660,000. Now I have to format these cells. So I'm going to come to home. I'm going to come over to cells and format, come down to the bottom of the menu. I'm going to do currency, take away the decimal points. It's got the dollar sign that I want, the negative number for the black parentheses, and I'm going to say okay. And then for the next number, I'm going to do home, come across to cells and format, do format cells. I'm going to make this a number because I don't want the dollar sign after the first number. I'm going to put in the 1,000 separators with a comma. I'm going to make the negative signs black with parentheses, and I'm going to say okay. So now that cell is set up. Now I'm going to come down and do the $270,000 that they have in there, and the $27,000 that they have in the book. And so now I'm going to format these by going to home, come across to cells, to format cells, come all the way to the bottom to format cells. I'm going to do currency. I'm going to take out the decimals. I've got the currency sign in there. I'm going to make that negative black parentheses and say okay. And then for the next one, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do home, come across to cells, format cells. I want this to be a number because it's not currency. Take away those decimal places. I want it to have the comma divider between the thousands, I'm going to make my negative numbers black parentheses, and I'm going to say okay. Now I have my page set up looking very much like their page. So that's the first requirement, to set up the following spreadsheet looking like this, the one in the book. So I've done that. Now I'm going to turn the page, and it says, for each company, compute gross profit. Well, gross profit is here in line 5, and gross profit is sales minus cost of goods sold. So I'm going to start by coming into cost of goods sold, going to home, and going to the border and put in a bottom border indicating that I'm doing some math there. So I'm going to come over to this one, the Christ company. I'm going to put in the same bottom border indicating that I'm doing some math there. Now for cost of goods sold, it's sales minus cost of goods sold, so I'm going to put in less. And I'm going to put in, because that's how the formula goes, is less. And then I'm going to put in a minus sign in front of the 600,000. Always remember to go to the end and do enter. My own mistake. And then a minus sign, go to the end and put in enter. And now I have both of those as negative numbers. Now that's going to equal gross profit. So I want to go to home and go to sum, and it's going to add those two for me algebraically with the pluses and minuses. So it'll tell me it's 200,000. And here it'll go to home, auto sum, and it'll tell me it's 440,000. Now remember that all sales can only be divided into two things. Can be divided into cost of goods sold and gross profit. So those numbers are complementary to one another. So this 2 and 6 will equal that 8, and this 6, 6 and 4, 4 will equal that 11. So that's how these work out. Now the next thing it says to do is to do the gross profit percentage. So I have to make this equal, and it's going to be the gross profit percentage. So I'm going to click on gross profit, which is in B5, and I'm going to divide it by sales. And it's telling me that it's 0.025 or 0.25. And then I'm going to do the same thing for Christ Company. I'm going to do equal, and it's the gross profit, and I have to put in divide the D5 by the D3, which is the sales, and that's 0.4. Now it asked me to calculate these as a percentage. So I'm going to reformat this cell, and I'm going to go to home, to cells and format, then come down to format cells, the very last one. I'm going to come down here in this menu, and I'm going to click on percentage. I do not want any decimal points because I just want this to be a percentage for me. And so then I'm going to, when the decimal points are gone, I'm going to click on OK. And it's 25% and 40%. So there I've calculated that gross profit percentage. The next thing it tells me to do is the net realizable value, which is right here. So like in the last one, I have to come under home and put in the border so that the reader of these statements knows that I'm doing some math at this point. The allowance for doubtful accounts is the same thing. It's a less. I'm going to subtract allowance for doubtful accounts. So I want to put in a less in that cell. And I want to put in a minus sign before the 10 because I'm subtracting. And I want to put in a minus sign before the 27 because I'm subtracting. And then I want to come back up to home, do auto sum, and it'll tell me the difference between those two numbers. Go back up to home, click on the auto sum, and it'll give me the difference between those two numbers. So now I have the net realizable value of each of these. Technically, the gross margin and the net realizable value are partway down the income statement and the balance sheet. So I'm going to take out these dollar signs that my computer is giving me the program for. So I'm going to go to Home, go across to Sales, click on Format, come down to Format Sales, and I'm just going to make this a number with no decimal points. And I'm going to put in the separator, the 1,000 number separator. I'm going to put in the negative at the black parentheses, and I formatted those two cells the way I want them. And the same thing here. This would be partway through the current assets, and so I want to take out that formatting that came up, and so I go to Home, Cells, Format, Format Cells, and now I just want it to be a number. I want no decimal points. I want the 1,000 separator, and I want the negative black parentheses. So now those are formatted the way they would actually appear in those statements. Now the accounts receivable turnover is a new concept for us. It's the ratio analyses that we're doing at the end of this chapter. So it's just after the financial analyst section of the chapter. We turn the page and it's on page 380, and it says sales divided by accounts receivable. Sales divided by accounts receivable. So here I want to go equal to sales, divide, put in the divide sign, accounts receivable. And I click on the accounts receivable. So I'm doing B3 divided by B9, and it's giving me this big number. Now I'm not going to worry too much about those decimal points. I could get rid of them if I wanted to, but I would want some of them still in there. It's not really that important. So now again, I want to go equal, and it's going to be sales divide by accounts receivable. Here D3 divide by D9, because I'm working in the D column, and oh, look at that number. Wow. Okay, now that just tells me that my accounts receivable are turning over about are turning over 6 times a year, or just over 6 times a year for Vong, and so that's going to be about every 60 days or 2 months. And it's doing 4 times a year, so that's going to be about every 90 days or 3 months. So I know that because there's 12 months in a year, I know that 6 is about every other month, and I know that 4 is about every 3 months. So now the average days to collection, that's what I would expect to find. So I'm going to get equals. Now I have to put in 365, the number of days in the year, and I divide that by the turnover rate, which is right here. So it's turning over, and here it's going to be equal to 365 divide by the turnover rate, and it's 89.59. Now I can look at these two numbers and see that these are days, because I divided them into days of the year. We don't use fraction of days. So I'm going to come back up here. I highlighted those two. I'm going to come up here to Home. I'm going to come over here to Cells and to Format Cells. I'm going to come down to the very last item in the drop-down menu of Format Cells. And now I want these to be numbers, and I want them to be whole numbers, no decimal points. And if they ever are a negative number, I want them to be black. So I'll format that cell, and now it's 59 days and 90 days. And now I've finished requirement 1. I've built this the way it should look, and I'm going to encourage you to maybe put a little box around it like that, and come up here to Home, and come up here to Borders, and put this nice thick black box border around it. And then when you look at it, it's much easier to see the numbers and see the schedule with which you are working. Below that then is a place to write your answer to requirement B. So under requirement B, it says, in relation to costs, so we're going to be in relation to costs, we're going to be looking at these cost of goods sold. Those are the only costs we have. And it says, Which company is charging more for its merchandise? Which one is charging more? Well, the contribution margin is 40% for Christ and only 25% for Vong. So Christ must be charging more for its merchandise. When we look here, its expenses, its costs are only going to be 60%, whereas these costs for Vong are 75%. So they have to be charging more to get this bigger contribution margin. So let's at least consider that for an answer. And let's say Christ Company, it says in relation to its costs, Christ Company is most likely charging higher prices for its merchandise. And so when we put that in there, it says, in relations to its cost, which company is charging more for its merchandise? So that would be our proposed answer. If you look at this and read the book and think something different, then you would do the very same sentence. You just change the word Christ to Vong. But that's how you would answer it. Now when we look at requirement C, it says, which company is likely to incur higher financial costs associated with granting credit to its customers? There's a whole section in the chapter about financial costs of granting credit. I'm going to ask you to go find that, to read it, and then click on requirement C, come up here under the box, and then write your answer to C. If your answer to C turns out to be very long, you can always cut the end of it and paste it down here on this second line. I actually gave you 3 lines to write on for each of these requirements, just depending upon what you think is right. Now when we look at requirement D, it says, which company appears to have more restrictive, that means more restrictive, less freedom, credit standards, restrictive credit standards, stern, you'd have to pay them back on time. When authorizing credit to customers, how do you know this? Well, when I look at these average days to collection, these guys, Vong is getting their customers to pay a full month earlier than what Chris Company is getting their customers to pay. So you want to think about that and consider some of those issues. There's information in the chapter about freedom of credit and whether credit is emphasizing whether accounts receivable has a closer relationship with the income statement or with the balance sheet. So you can begin to think about some of that with respect to D. Again, with D, you take D, you click right up here in the function line, and you just start writing which company you think has more restrictive credit. So as you can see, this brings us to the last of the requirements. This example shows you how to build this spreadsheet, so you can build it on your own, just like I did, and you can answer the requirements here. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I hope it's been helpful to see how this goes together. If you have any questions, I welcome email. I welcome you coming to our class in Siemens Hall 109 on Mondays at 11, and then in the computer lab at 12. If you're in the online class, I might not, you'll have your own lab Wednesday at 1. And then again, you could ask questions about this on Wednesday at 11 in Siemens Hall 109 if you'd like to. So thank you for working with me, and I appreciate you listening to this video, and I hope it's been helpful to you as well. Goodbye.